Okay, everyone, I said that I would make a recording of just part of what I guess the rest of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. And it looks like Tao Te Ching, but I I don't know, there's something in the way that they translate words into English from that, because they don't use the same alphabet. Obviously, they have pictorial, they don't have letters the way that we do. So they use symbols, and those symbols, essentially what they try to do is in English mimic the way that the words sound, but it really isn't Tao, it's Dao. And a lot of the pronunciation doesn't match necessarily. I don't know if pronunciation has changed over the centuries or if we have a better ear now. I don't know. I don't know. So sometimes things get lost in the translation, but it sometimes is spelled Dow with a D instead of a T. And honestly, both are acceptable. But we talked a little bit in the last recorded session about what Taoism is. And in some ways, all of these little poems, these little vignettes are meant to be teaching vignettes. So they're trying to tell people a little bit of the philosophy and give them, I mean, some of them are pretty hard to understand or cryptic, but at the same time, a lot of its concepts are very hard to understand. And so I'm just going to try to cover some of the basic ones that are left so that you know what to look for on the test. So one thing that they talked about already is the whole idea of trying to force yourself or force the way as opposed to allowing the way to guide you. That the whole idea of what I want is not important, it's what the Tao is. And our goal is not to force ourselves on it and say, this is what we want, pray for whatever we want or something, but to recognize our path that already exists. And it's the path, not the path of least resistance, but it's the path of the least trauma. It's the path that will find us contented. It'll make us happy and satisfied, as opposed to wanting more and angry and frustrated and facing walls after walls after walls. That's the whole point of Taoism. But Taoism is also about balance. So we talked about the yin and yang last time, the symbol that shows the two sides. And they're not good and bad. It's just balance. It's about finding, like, work and the work-life balance, or the play and work balance, or even evening and morning. Finding a balance during the day. And you can't. Essentially what they say is all of one and none of the other is bad. You're not supposed to just work. You're not supposed to just play. I mean, if you just play, what happens? Well, your income runs out and you get fired, and you're still miserable. If all you do is work, well, you're going to be miserable too, because you're not getting any fun. But even with work, it should be a mixture of pleasure and not so pleasurable things. So work shouldn't just be fun. It should be hard too. There should be challenges to it. And so that's normal. That's the way it's supposed to be. And so instead of wishing that work wasn't hard, I would love to just teach. This would be great to just, do a bunch of videos or whatever. But honestly, it's better if I, also have assignments and I have to grade those. And grading is my least favorite activity in teaching. And I've been still doing it for, 30 years, but it's still, I don't like it. It's not fun. So I find ways to make it easier. I find ways to make the assignments more fun for the students. I find, but finding a path is about, essentially making it so the miserable things are less miserable and the good things are better. And you're finding yourself within the harmony of the universe as opposed to bucking against it. And so their attempts to describe what the Tao is almost like describing the universe. So in chapter 4 at the end, it says the Tao is so profound and yet invisible. It exists in everywhere and anywhere. Certainly Christians can look at this and go, well, this is like the existence of God. He's everywhere and anywhere. But it even says, we don't know where it came from. We don't know what created it, at least according to Taoism, because it existed before heaven and earth. So it's like the creation, long, long before the origin of us. And then in later chapters, so chapter 5, for instance, it talks about nature. And it says, of course, this is Taoism, it shows the greatest and perfect kindness by giving life to let all things grow and accomplish them with a hastening of harvest. And so to us, nature may seem unkind. So when it gives up animals for sacrifice, gives up so that um, other animals can eat, like us. Most of us are not vegetarian, and so other things die so that we can live. And it's even if all you ate was plants, you're still killing plants to eat them. But that's part of the process of nature. That's what it is. And so he's not, the nature of the Tao, of the universe, of the way is not unkind. We may see it as so, but even, I mean, Taoists would probably look at some of the natural upheaval that's happening, tsunamis or hurricanes, or yes, they're awful in that they kill people, that people die in this, onslaught of ocean water, or in an earthquake, or in tornadoes, or, other natural disasters, snowstorms, for instance. But that's part of the balance of the universe. There is, and the balance between things is also life and death. And you cannot, there's an acceptance to the fact that death is inevitable. And to the Taoist, not a bad thing. Death is something to look forward to as much as you look forward to life. Now, it's also, they are very accepting of change. In fact, that's one of the constants within Taoism, is that nothing will stay the same, and it shouldn't. If you are staying the same, if you haven't changed anything in 20 years, you have stagnated, and you are not, on a journey. You're stuck in like a ripple pool or something on the journey because you've decided to stop, and that's actually not a good thing. And when you resist change, which many, I mean, it's a human nature, it's very much human nature to do that, to resist change. But when we do that, we actually set ourselves up for frustration down the line, or unhappiness, or boredom, or all sorts of things, division with other people who want to change. And so for the Taoists, everything is change is absolutely inevitable. And it's not something to mourn, but something to accept. You don't have to look forward to it either. Change is not always good. It's not always a positive thing for us. Change includes death. Change includes losses of jobs or relationships, but they're supposed to happen. And so we can be angry about it, and or go become alcoholics, or we can accept that that's the course of nature, mourn for people who have been lost, and yet move on and continue to grow. And so part of this too, I mean, it's even saying, it'll describe what it's like, the universe seems empty, yet it gives a supply that never fails. The more it moves, the more it brings forth. And movement goes along with change and transformation. And so nothing is ever stagnant. Like it's a river. If anything, any metaphor applies to this, it's like the current of a river. And you either flow along with the current and are happy, and float along or whatever, or you try to fight against it, and you're going to make yourself miserable just because of that. You refuse to move when it's moving, and that's not a good thing. It's going to take a lot of effort. Okay. And then I don't know that we really need, I mean, they certainly see the universe as immortal. So even though everything changes and dies and stuff like that, we are all part of that universe. And so we get reabsorbed, and the universe itself is immortal. Let me see other key things that you really need to do. Okay, so let's look at this particular aspect of it. Okay. I thought I was trying to make sure I didn't go too far. So in chapter 8, it says a person of great virtue is like the flowing water. Of course, again, that's a metaphor that's obviously used for Taoism. Water benefits all things and contends not with them. It puts itself in a place that no one wishes to be, and thus it is closest to the Tao. Okay, so it's filling the hollow places. And it says a virtuous person is like water, because the virtuous person is deep water that is calm and peaceful. His heart is like water that benefits all. So he gives, remember, they go into places other people don't go. So they go and give help to the poor who everybody, or to the homeless people on the road that everybody else is like glaring at or telling to go, telling them to go away because they're, they stink or whatever. This person is not turning anybody away. He's going to the places where um, there's most need of him. Just like water drops down into the valleys and the places where it's needed to grow the crops and things like that. And so the water benefits everybody. His words are sincere, like the constant flow of water. There's a purity to them. His governing is natural, without desire. So in other words, if he is a leader and he's leading, he leads without any personal agenda. So his goal, like if he becomes a senator or something like that, his whole goal is only service, not self-service. So it's not about making alliances so that he can make more money. It's not about making connections with not only people here in our country, but outside of our country, to make more money. It's not about even his personal interests. Oh, he personally feels this way. If that doesn't serve the whole, then it has no bearing. And so many of us would wish, of course, that our public servants were more like this, where it's all about how do we serve the people that we've been hired to serve or elected to serve, as opposed to how do we front our personal agenda. And so that, but this is without desire, it's without greed, it's without any um, narcissistic qualities. It's not about us, it's about who we serve. And pointed outward, we know that statistically this is a good therapeutic thing for people, because the more we focus on ourselves and our own needs, and the more likely we'll be envious, jealous, resentful, frustrated. The more we focus on what we can do for other people, the less we feel all of these negative emotions. We don't do, and we give to people, not for any acclaim, not for any fame, not to post it on Instagram so that we have 865,000 followers, but out of the goodness of our hearts, because we see a person who's suffering and we have the means to fulfill that need that they have. And so it's all about, and there are no strings attached to any of it. So the water doesn't take, it only gives. And so this person, if the person is truly following the Tao, is only giving. They're not, okay, well, I gave you this, now I deserve, or in return you give, or, even they give a gift and, even expecting like a thank you note or something is too much, because that's selfish. So it's not about you, it's about all of the things the good that you can do. And it's never about you. Never about you. As soon as it becomes about you, you've moved away from the Tao, because the universe is what matters, not you individually, or not me individually. It's that I fill the places in the universe, the holes in the universe that people have, and I give them what they need, even when other people don't want to give it to them. That's what being, if I were to follow Taoism, that's the expectation, is that I would give unceasingly. And that's where the joy comes from. And the truth is they're right. Psychologically, the more you give and the more you volunteer your time, the more you are generous with other people and give things out to people, the more you do things like this and A lot of us see that as like self-sacrifice. It really isn't. It actually makes you a very happy person. People who are volunteering and giving all the time are really happy people. And it's because of what they are doing. It is actually an after effect. So they say it's what, better to give than receive? Absolutely. It is. It's actually better for your psyche to give than to receive. And so he's saying that, but that's what Lao Tzu is absolutely stipulating it, that this is all given freely and generously and to everyone. And he speaks truth, he's sincere, he cares, everything, all of his actions are compassion filled. And even when he doesn't give people what they want, he's giving them what they need. But he has the judgment and discernment to see that. Okay, so then we get to chapter 9, and it's funny because in Christianity, if you look at the 7 deadly sins, the top sin, the most important one, because it's the base for all the other sins, is pride. And that's a bad thing. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, you need to be proud of yourself. You actually don't, according to Taoism, according to Christianity, according to Buddhism, according to Confucianism. I'm trying to think. Pretty much every major religion says you do not need to be proud. In fact, pride is the source of a lot of unhappiness, especially because if you have too much pride in yourself and you think that you're better than other people, you're going to create unhappiness, both for yourself and other people. That's the thing, is you're not, if you become bitter and resentful because other people aren't giving you what you think you need or deserve because you're better than they are or something, you're going to be more angry, more frustrated, grumpier, harder to be around, more depressed. I mean, and people don't want to be around people like that, and certainly no one wants to be told, oh, well, I'm better than you are. No one wants to be told that. And so that causes other people to react in ways that are also prideful. And that's not good either. It's a toxicity. And so for Taoism, this is absolutely, I mean, but it's honestly, it's in so many other faiths as well. It's that you don't you don't think only of, oh, what do I get out of this, and how much recognition do I have? And the problem is too, if you look at this from the point of view of today's social media, so much depends on how many views you get and likes and the chatter about you and what people say, and it's, people are being essentially they're growing up to be self-centered, and it's really toxic. And what they don't understand is how unhappy it makes them. Taoists would look at this and go, no, 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 we're not getting on Instagram and we're not posting all this stuff about me, because that's antithetical to what Taoism is. So those who overly pride wealth, that's too much. Why do we need, what do we need? Truly need to survive. We need shelter and food and a place to sleep so we can get some sleep. We need very basic things. And yet we amass more wealth even than we need. And the more wealth we amass, do we become happier? Nope. Nope. Statistically, billionaires are no happier than regular or ordinary people like us. They just aren't. And the more money you get, it's not like suddenly it makes all the unhappy stuff go away. If anything, just the quest to amass extra wealth is something that makes you more unhappy. And I mean, at some point too, no matter how much they pay you, if a job is really horrible, a job is really horrible, and it becomes too much. So even if you get paid a ton of money, if it's a horrible job and it's toxic, it's still going to make you very unhappy, and the money won't make up for that. So they say it's better to restrain early. In other words, don't start trying to get a lot of wealth when you're young. Learn to live with less. Those who are not content with fame is like polishing the edge of a knife. The truth is, are we content with fame? Is anyone truly content with fame? No. They want more fame. Just like if they got $1 million, they want another $1 million. And fame gets, the higher you go, you've heard that, the bigger you get, the harder you fall. Well, there we go. The sharper it gets, the easier it is to break. So if you get too much fame, it is really easy for you to lose it. Wealth and treasures are but illusions that one cannot possess. And the whole idea of possession, well, okay, so if we take Taoism, Taoism is very much aligned with Buddhism. It's connected to that. A lot of people who are Buddhists are also Taoists, but Taoism is in some ways assuming that the universe is a constant and immortal. And so when you die, you go back into the universe, you become absorbed. And then you come back and live again? For Buddhists, yes. For a lot of Taoists, yes. But you essentially have many lives. And yet, can you ever take your stuff with you when you die? No, you can't. There's even a play called You Can't Take It With You. And and some of the oldest plays we have talk about the fact that when you die, all of the riches that you amassed are gone. All the friends you had, well, they're not going to go with you into the grave. And so you've lost them. They're gone. So why care so much about something that's so fleeting? As soon as you die, all of that stuff's gone anyway. So don't care about it for now, because it will just make you unhappy. Those who are arrogant of their wealth and fame shall invite blame upon oneself. The nature Tao teaches one to retreat after one's success and not hold on to the credit. The credit is a big deal. Have you ever done anything where you did a nice deed for someone and kept it secret so they didn't know who did it? I have. And honestly, it's the coolest feeling ever. And there's no acclaim, there's no advertising it on Facebook. Hey, this is what I did. You just did it because you know it was the right thing to do, and you know how much of a difference it made for that person. And yet it was not something that you ever needed reciprocating, and you also didn't need any of the credit for it. When we do something for credit, it changes the nature of our action, because instead of serving another person, we're serving ourselves. And that's not a good thing, actually. For Taoists, it's a very bad thing, because again, you're turning back to yourself. Narcissism is not where you want to be. You have to be thinking about the whole, not about yourself. And so this oneness is what you eventually get to. And that's through successive lives. I mean, both Hinduism and Buddhism assume that we have reincarnation, that we die and then we live another life. We're born again, live another life, die, born again, live another life. And essentially we do this process until we get to the point of nirvana, of this, and it's oneness with the universe. It's a point where there is no sense of self anymore. Everything is selflessness. And there's no bitterness, there's no hatred. We see the world clearly and rationally and beautifully and truthfully, and we deal with people in a compassionate, generous, honest way at all times. There's no more, we don't have to grow anymore, because we essentially have created our lives to be connected indelibly to the universe and what the universe needs. And so essentially what they're saying, can one unite the body and spirit as one and embrace the oneness? And it says, without departing from the great Tao. So now we're looking at ourselves. Can one achieve harmony with such gentleness by holding on to the true spirit within, as if the innocence of an infant? Can one freely free oneself from worldly knowledge and cleanse one's mind so that no fault shall be made? Can a ruler love his people by governing with the natural way without personal intention? Yes, the answers are all yes. And the mysterious nature, so all of these different things, the mysterious nature creates and nurtures all things without the desire to possess them. It performs with all efforts without claiming for credit. So nature just happens. Things just live and are given life, and it's beautiful and amazing without any ownership. It flourishes all beings without the intention to take control. And so this is really important. It's not just, okay, so think about your garden. or your yard. And you make things, for me, I like things to look really natural. I have a couple of friends who are kind of like that. Some people do the extra trimming thing where they trim all the trees. They'll even get up in the trees and like chuck them down and stuff. I have a particular bone to pick with people who do crepe myrtle, where they take crepe myrtles and chop them off. Like it's ridiculous. I've unfortunately walking around my neighborhood, I see it all the time. But the truth is for Taoists, they'd say, no, leave them alone. Leave the trees alone. Let them grow. And they say, well, but I want them to look like X, Y, and Z. I want them to look all cute. Well, but that's not the way they're supposed to look. And nature creates them and lets them live, but lets them grow the way they want to grow, the way that it suits them. And the nature doesn't have any, it doesn't care. And so why should we? Even the whole idea of mowing grass for Taoists, they would be like, why? What's with the mowing grass thing? And so I know that sounds really weird, but essentially it's don't mess with stuff, A, that you don't understand, but why do you have ownership? The whole idea too, and it's funny because this is very much a Native American concept, though they were not Taoists. Native Americans had no understanding. Almost no tribes had any territory because they never had an assumption that they could own land. If anything, they belonged to the land and not the other way around. And yet in today's world, land is very expensive, and you have to keep your own land, and people put fences around land, and they put security cameras up to defend their land, and they even have shotguns, if they live way out in the middle of nowhere and they're afraid somebody will come and take their land, and but for the Taoists, they're like, but you don't actually own that. And plus, remember, when you die, you can't take that land with you. And so the idea of amassing tons and tons of that, especially if you don't need it and you can't use it, what's the point? Just for money, which you can't take with you either. And so that idea is kind of against nature. Nature doesn't hold on to and own any of it. It just allows it to be. Its whole process is generative, and then destructive. So everything lives and dies. We have the seasons, things grow and then get ooky and fall to the ground. Apples are delicious at a certain point and then they get all sloppy, gross. Or they're eaten by bugs, which also have to live. And so, even Taoists would even say, look, mosquitoes are supposed to happen because they're eating off of you, but it's not like it kills everybody. Yeah, there is Lyme disease and stuff, with ticks and stuff, but at the same time, why do those creatures why do they have less of a right to live than we do? And no, I'm not that much of a Taoist, so I don't like mosquitoes. They love me, but I don't like them. But the idea is that there's a balance to that, to nature. That yes, I'm if I go out in nature, I'm going to be I'll be eaten by other animals, even if it's just little welts on my arms and legs. But it's part of that balance of the universe, and the nature doesn't care. Nature's like, you get life, well, so do they. Everything gets life. You die, so do they. Everything dies. It's part of that eternal process. Okay, so I'm going to skip chapter 11 because it's hard to explain and it'll just take a little bit too long, and I don't want to do that to people, and I'm not going to ask about that particular thing. With chapter 12, though, so 5 colors can blind one's eyes, 5 tones can deafen one's ears, 5 flavors can dull one's taste buds, the pursuit of pleasures can derange one's mind, the hard-to-get valuables can distort one's behavior. So in other words, sensory pleasure, and that includes really rich food with lots of different flavors in it, really, fantastical colors, lots of beautiful jewelry, too much music. Think about, okay, there are songs you love, right? Okay, so the songs, though, are put together melodiously so that they fit all the different parts of it, whether the different instruments or the different voices harmonize. Okay, right? Now play your favorite song and then pick a totally different song and then play them both at the same time. And you'll probably go, nah, we're not doing that, and stop it because it's irritating. What was harmonious, if it's overdone, becomes annoying. And so for them, they said, don't overdo anything. If you taste one, I mean, it's better for you to really, really thoroughly enjoy a vanilla ice cream cone than it is to put 5 flavors together and the flavors become overwhelming. So it's better to have a painting that's simple and graceful and imparts just one image than to try to do too much in a painting and it becomes overwhelming and too much to handle. Okay, so it's looking at simplicity and also the lack of acquiring stuff. So just because something is complex, just because something has so many flavors, doesn't make it better. In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen it where, a simple tune sounds so beautiful, and yet when you try to over orchestrate it, it becomes weird. And a lot of people do that. Okay, think about it this way. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but okay, so the national anthem, the US national anthem, so many people sing it, and the vast majority of them today, don't sing just the song. They add a bunch of riffs to it, or they harmonize it for 8-part harmony, and it becomes almost unrecognizable, or they slow it way down and every note gets kind of squeezed. And it becomes, like, okay, well, I think that was the national anthem, but I don't know. It's hard. It's so complex that it becomes less pleasant. And that's kind of what, essentially, don't overindulge all of that stuff because it will just become a mess. It will become less happy and less pleasurable because you're trying too much stuff. Probably some people would say, well, Taoism is just boring. But for Taoism, it's like, okay, too much is too much. And it's not something to seek. We get used to thinking, okay, well, I'll be happier if I get more stuff or more whatevers, or this is more complex, or I'm less bored. And yet we fill our lives with complexity that is meaningless. And we do that just so we're not bored, and it really doesn't fill our lives at all. And that's what they're saying. Now, of course, they didn't have cell phones. So this was written a couple thousand years minimum before cell phones were even invented. But the truth is even without cell phones, couldn't we make our lives so busy that we really never sit down and think? Yep. Now, okay, so chapter 13 is a really interesting one. So, and it talks about a couple of things. First, honor and disgrace, the idea of having a good reputation or a bad reputation. And then illness. That's another thing. Oh, I'm afraid of getting sick. I'm afraid of getting sick. Think about COVID, and everybody's afraid of getting sick. But the truth is honor, and if people care about whether you're great or not, and they think that you're honorable and they have a great opinion of you, it doesn't matter. Especially if you'll do almost anything to keep their favor, because then you kind of sell yourself out for people to like you. If we lose favor, does that really change who we are? No. We're still the same person whether everybody understands it or not. So you can lose your reputation and still be a good person. Do we lose our reputation sometimes erroneously? Do things come up on the internet or get, slander gets tossed around and all the gossip is saying something, but it's not true? Does it make the person any different? No. The person is good or bad by their own actions. But if they rely too much on their reputation, that skews their life out of proportion, because what matters is not what people think. It matters what you do every day. You care too much what people think, and you will end up doing things that you shouldn't to keep that honor and to keep that reputation. Now, then they get to illness. What does it mean by the great distress lies in one's body? And it says we have fear because we worry about our physical self. Now, part of that is we're afraid to die. We're afraid of getting sick and getting old and getting decrepit and being in pain and things like that. But if one's body does not exist, how can one have fear? And it says, he who values the world as much as he values himself can be entrusted with the ruling of the world. He who loves the world as much as he loves himself can be entrusted with the guidance of the world. So essentially, he loves himself, but he also loves the world. But if he only cares about what the world thinks of him, of his reputation, then he will not necessarily act the way we should. The thing is, what isn't resolved in this particular thing, though, is the distress in one's body. So if you are ill, and the truth is illness can, you have a headache, it's amazing what you can't get done because your head is pounding. And yet, what Taoism would say is if you're too caught up in the pain, you can't release it. You can't essentially focus on anything else, that you're too caught up in yourself. And so probably is what, they're not, now these people are not medical doctors, but they'd say part of the problem is the stress, that your stress over being unhealthy can actually make you more unhealthy. The stress over what's going on in your job can actually make you ill. The stress over those kinds of things, or even what people think, can make you ill or make you depressed or anxious or something like that. And so essentially what your job is not to worry about whether you're sick. Not, and again, you especially shouldn't worry about dying, because that's going to happen. And you just need to chillax and accept it. I know that sounds really weird and mean, but that's what Taoists would still say. And so pretty much everything as we go through, this connection to the way is it's not something you can measure. It's not something you can see. It's just, it's probably more than anything else, it's something that you can feel. It's a sense of purpose and a sense, like a lack of awareness of yourself. You are not just floating in the ocean's current, you are the ocean's current. So you've lost your own form. You're not trying to swim above it, you're just embedded in it. And I don't know if that's probably as good a metaphor as I can possibly get for how to reach that point when you are really part of this, and it's part of you, and you're no longer, I mean, you're just connected to everybody else. That's part of what Buddhism teaches, is this idea that you become so interconnected with the universe and with every other being that you don't see yourself as separate. And that's the goal, is that you lose all sense of yourself and your own needs and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I think as far as that one, I don't think you really need to worry. We only go to what, 19? And so 16 talks a lot about the achieving the ultimate void means maintaining calmness with sincerity in order to observe the growth and flourish of all beings. So the whole idea, this is why it goes a lot with Buddhism, is that it's about letting go of all the emotion and the selfishness and everything, so that you can see the world clearly and act upon that world as generously and self-effacingly as possible. So, and peacefully. One religion that's never started wars, I mean, Buddhism has never started wars. Taoism is more a philosophy, but it's never started wars either, because part of the essence of it is being at peace, not only with one's own life, but with the way that the world is. I could really learn a lot of this, because I get really worked up sometimes about the way the world is. And what they're saying is, look, you got to let it go. And if more people, I mean, the reason all those people out there are angry is because they won't let it go. They won't just relax. And you have to allow nature to take its course. You have to allow things to be. You have to, and that's good at what you see as good and bad, but all things to be. And you have to allow people voice. You have to, and not outshout them. You have to let them be who they are and be at peace with them. And know that everything's going to come back to its original source in the universe. Knowing that everything is circular. know that change is inevitable. And so these are not, Taoists are not the political activists of the world. Even if they believe in peace, they're not going to like pick it and go, let's have peace, no more war. They're not, no, because what they will see is that peace will come. And if they can live in a way that makes it so peace comes, then more people, they will influence others towards that same peace just by being who they are and not taking the actions of anger or resentment or division. And of course, that's because they know the natural law is for balance and change and circular inevitability. Okay. But if they're ignorant, or the people who are ignorant of this natural law will act recklessly and invite misfortune because they will do things that they shouldn't. They will be not at peace. They will make war. They will go to battle and do violence. And so to know the constant law of nature is to be generous. To be generous is to be impartial. To be impartial, one is the sovereign, is essentially ruler of their domain, but that's because one is one with nature itself. When one's physical body dies away, Tao still long endures. And so the assumption too is that so does the essence of who you are. Is it a separate soul? Not to Taoists, it's not. You become, squished back into the great universe as a whole. And then maybe you'll pop out again in a life, but then you squish back in at your death. So as far as the rest, yeah, because then it also talks about what virtue and honor is. And so one then acts, okay, so in early ancient mankind, Tao has been in existence. So always, before we were ever born. Men possess it without knowing it. One then acts with virtue and honor, which is inferior to Tao. So we act because of the Tao, and because of our knowledge of the Tao, we act in good ways. But that's not as important as the Tao itself. The less superior is to act with fear. The least superior is to act with disgrace. So we do horrible things that would embarrass any moral person, and because of selfishness or whatever, do the things that, commit crimes, things like that. And we do this when one does not have enough faith and hence no confidence. And this is probably the most cryptic thing you're going to find, but this is one of those things that people like literally would write up and put on their walls at their Taoists. The nature of Tao is distinguished by wordless teaching. So it's not because you speak it, with the natural act of virtue without action. So not talking and not doing, but being. And so without any effort at all, we can harmonize with the nature Tao. We can be a couch potato and be one with the Tao. We don't have to go out and change the world to be Taoists. In fact, that's not what Taoism is. Okay? So essentially what they say is the more we get people to move in this direction, the more harmonious the world will be. And the more laws we need, and the more violence will occur. But if we get more and more people who embrace the Tao and recognize the universe and their part in it, the less we will buck up against the universe, the less we will fight nature, the less we will fight each other, and the less selfish we will be. And it says refrain selfness and diminish worldly desires. So this is, and it even says these three statements all about, what we're supposed to do. This is what people should do: return to their original true self and embrace the pure oneness. Refrain selfness and diminish worldly desires. Now, for Buddhism, the number one thing essentially one of the basic rules is life is suffering. But then one of the next ones is, the amount you suffer depends on what your desires are. You quell those desires. You desire less and you will suffer less. But it's about the same thing. Don't put yourself first. Don't make yourself the whole reason for the universe, because you're not. You are not the center of the universe, and you never will be, because that would make you really unhappy. So instead, the universe itself is the center, and you leave and then return to the center. And ideally, your life would be so happy if you would just stay connected to the center of the universe and one with it, and not think about yourself at all. I hope that makes sense. It is a big, weird thing to kind of figure out, but the main things that you have to understand about Taoism are that idea that nature is ideal, that it's connected almost inextricably to that oneness, to the Tao, that the Tao is, think of that metaphor, the Tao is that river, and you're traveling, I mean, most of us are traveling in it. And if we fight against the current, we're going to have a frustrated, angry life. And if we flow with the current, we're going to be better. But the more we flow into it so that we are not a separate entity, but become part of the river, the happier we're going to be. That's essentially Taoism. And so if you do have questions about that before the test, go ahead and after you watch this video, just let me know. And I will answer what questions I can. But hopefully that at least covers some of the basic ideas of this selection. Thanks, you guys. I will talk to you later.